Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Monday, December 7th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast is 2020, the year that will live in infamy. And of course, this is a play on words, paraphrasing the words of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt some 7 decades ago. Of course, this is the anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attacks, the day that the Japanese declared war on the United States of America, and subsequently, President Roosevelt made such a statement that December 7th, 1941 will forever live in infamy. That was a day, and we still talk about it and we still remember it. Those survivors of World War II, the youngest amongst them, would be about 97 years old today. Some young men, even younger than the age of 18, enlisted. Of course, they weren't allowed to, but they did. They lied about their age, and they got in and they fought World War II. How many 16, 17, 18-year-olds today in this country can you see signing up to fight a war to defend this country? Whether from an internal enemy or from an external one. And with respect to the external, I really don't know if it's worth it. I mean, this country, the Constitution, yes. Our values that we're supposed to uphold and stand for, yes. The good people of this country, yes. Free market capitalism, yes. But we don't have these things. Yeah, we have good people. But this country in its current form, is it really worth defending? The answer to me is a resounding no. The enemy is within. It's our institutions, it's our government, it's our central banking authorities. And this parallels everywhere else around the world. So I wanted to put together a list today to talk about the things that we have already been through throughout 2020. And of course, we still have a few weeks to go, don't we? And those of you who have been with me know my take on what's likely going to happen next year. And I think next year is going to be even worse than this year. Of course, I say that with a heavy heart. I say that unfortunately, but that is my honest analysis, my honest assessment. Because money printing, debt expansion is not a panacea. I'm skeptical of the vaccine. We can talk about that too a little bit later. So I do want to get to some market performance, and then I'm going to go through my list. And I imagine there are going to be things that I forgot, because there's just been so much that has taken place. And of course, I'm talking about the major stories, a lot affecting the globe, but a lot also particular to the United States of America. So I am sure around the globe, I am going to be missing a number of issues, but please feel free to send them to me, and I will gladly discuss them and add them to the list for a later podcast. But first is some market performance. We have the dollar index trading a little bit up, not much, but slightly in the green, trading at 90.83. There isn't much movement in the currency markets right now, so we'll just leave it with the dollar index, again, trading at 90.83. Overnight futures trading, we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average down about 0.1%. The S&P 500 is also down about 0.2%, as is the NASDAQ 100. Cash trade in Japan is also down about 0.1%. And a mixed bag across the pond in Europe today. Nothing miraculous or nothing to write home about to the upside or to the downside. And the Australian cash trade is currently up about 0.2%. On the share price front, we have Apple gaining 1.2%. Tesla, the poster child for this everything bubble, gained an additional 7.13% today, 42.7 points, now trading at $642 a share. $642 a share. Now, for those of you who are riding this wave, riding this bubble, more power to you. But if you're going to talk to me about Tesla, please have some respect and decency and tell me that that's what you're doing. That you are riding this wave, you are riding this bubble, and that's perfectly fine. You do with your money what you want to do. But do not tell me that Tesla is a sound company. Do not tell me that their valuations are justified, because they are not. And you are going to be displaying your ignorance to the world. That's as simple as that. You want to ride the wave? Be my guest. But don't tell me these valuations and these prices are justified, because they're not. Because if you were to take into consideration, and I'm not doing the math in my head right now, but I did see somebody on Twitter tweet earlier today that if we weren't taking into consideration the Tesla split, I think it was 5-1 a couple months ago, we would have Tesla trading at $3,200 a share. So you take their market cap, and it is larger than the rest of the auto market combined. And the only way that they show a profit on paper is by the grace of government. Tax credits, subsidies, and any other mumbo-jumbo that the government wants to give them. They have recalls on their vehicles, etc., etc. Microsoft is flat. Amazon also flat for the day. Facebook gained 2% to round it out on some of the heavy hitters. WTI is trading at $45.49 a barrel. Brent is at $48.44. Natural gas got hit big today, down several percentage points, trading at $2.47. Gold and silver had a choppy day, but nonetheless, in overnight trading here, they are both in the green. Gold is trading at $1,869 an ounce, and silver is getting closer to the $25 figure at $24.66. Those are spot prices. And to round it out, Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 0.94%, so inching ever higher in the bond market. This is not because of growth. Bond market knows what's coming. But regardless of that being the case, and of course what's coming is inflation, and what's coming is stagflation. And then what's likely to come after that is hyperinflation, because we are a first world banana republic here. Okay? So all of these markets are busted. The stock market's busted. Bond market's busted. Interest rate markets, I mean, they're all connected too. Don't misunderstand that. They're all connected to some degree. Currency markets are busted. It's a currency war. It's a race to the bottom. I mean, the only thing to me that has any real type of value, I think, for the long term in this environment in which we are going to find ourselves for quite a while is precious metals and commodities. Real things. Real things. Trading those contracts, those futures contracts, trading the stocks, the mining stocks, that I think is where the best value is going to be over the long term. Because those are real things. And people in this environment are going to need real things, and they're going to revert to fundamental assets. And from a monetary sense, we're talking gold in particular, and silver as a secondary knock-on effect. Okay? And don't get me wrong, platinum will outperform as well. But from a monetary perspective, it's gold and it's silver. And we ain't seen nothing yet. We know these markets are rigged. This is not conspiracy theory. This is in the news. This is in court documents. JP Morgan Chase paid $920 million in fines for rigging the precious metals market. And then they go off and they make $1 billion as they rig it. How many people lost money because of this? Were they made whole with that $920 million fine? Where'd that money go, right? I mean, what's going on here? And we're going to get into that because that's one of the things on our list for 2020. So that's some of the market performance. So these aren't necessarily in any particular order, but just as I was trying to rattle my brain and some ideas and what took place throughout this year. So here we go. We had the Australian and the U.S. wildfires. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there are bushfires once again in the land down under taking place. We had the Iranian assassinations, one that took place with General Qasem Soleimani several months ago at the beginning of the year. And then recently we had the Iranian scientist who was just assassinated as well. We have saber rattling that took place and continues to take place. Venezuela, Iran, several other countries. And it's not just here to the United States. I mean, we've seen these skirmishes. We've seen some smaller wars break out. And of course, anybody who's in a war, it's nothing small, it's serious. Wars and conflicts breaking out. Syria is still a debacle. Turkey has been getting involved with everybody and their mother. China and India. India and Pakistan. Armenia, Azerbaijan. I mean, the list just keeps going. Somalia, Yemen, Ethiopia. The list keeps on going, and it, unfortunately, in my estimation, is going to get worse. We've had trade wars We have tariffs. We had negative oil prices earlier this year. We had the impeachment trial, the hearings in this country. We had the Democratic Party primaries. All those nutcases up there promising free stuff because not one of them knows basic arithmetic. We had the election. We have the circus of the election that continues to this day. To me, it's more of a distraction. It doesn't matter which bozo is sitting behind the Resolute desk. Don't you get it by now? How much more do you need to see? Again, one of the reasons I'm going through this list. What have these people done? And now you have Republicans pushing hard for the senatorial race down in Georgia, for those two Republican senators to hold their seats. And of course, both of those idiots, as far as I'm concerned, were caught red-handed with insider trading, especially around the time of COVID-19. But don't worry about it. They're good people. And as long as we have two more Republicans in the Senate, everything will be A-OK. Please tell me you were not born last night. Please, just don't do it. What evidence do you have that the Republicans are going to stop anything? Have we talked about the Nobody Cares Act here? Have we talked about 96-0, no votes for America? Another subsequent vote was 100-0, no votes to America. What don't you understand? And that's the Senate. What do you think these people are now miraculously going to do? Wake up. Leave them. They have left you. Don't care about them because they don't care about you. If you remain a Republican or if you remain a Democrat, please leave those parties. Please change your voter registration. Of course, I would argue that you become a libertarian, the fastest growing party in the country. But independent, unaffiliated, I don't care. But leave them. Please send a message. Because they don't care about you. And we ain't seen nothing yet. Because next year is going to be a doozy. Because you cannot print your way and spend your way into solvency, into growth, into more jobs. It's not how it works. And we're going to find that out the hard way. Because there's no responsibility and no accountability. But keep voting for these people and expect something different. We have Brexit, right? All that drama earlier this year. Last year, this year, continuing. Obviously, a lot of it was on pause because of the lockdowns and COVID-19. But Brexit is still a ball being juggled up in the air. We talked about the wars and the conflicts. COVID-19, the economic collapse, the inflation that we are seeing in a lot of those weakest links. Again, Venezuela, Argentina, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Turkey just hit a record monthly high or a recent monthly high with respect to their inflation rate, over 14%. Okay? Iran, Lebanon, if I didn't mention them already. The list will continue. These countries are collapsing. Now, a one-off, not too big of a deal, but once they start adding up, it's a problem. It's a snowball effect. Buckle up. Did you forget about the locusts? One of the worst locust outbreaks we've had in generations. Some notable earthquakes, some recently, some throughout the year, some in some places that typically they don't happen. A very active hurricane season, and a very lengthy one, if that, at this year. Protests and riots that have been taking place in 2019, picking up steam, somewhat shutting down, obviously, with the restrictions and the lockdowns. Riots, government overthrows, people back in the streets because of all of these lockdowns. This is beyond ridiculous. The powers that be, these governments, they want to say, okay, you're a small business in particular. Here's what you have to do to open up shop. They do it. They spend what money they have, or they use the assistance from the government that they receive to put into place these practices that the very government who advised them to do so, and maybe subsidize them to do so, is now turning around the government and telling these very businesses, oh, you got to shut down again. I don't care if you followed the rules. I don't care if you put plexiglass up. I don't care if you mandate people wear masks if they come into your shop. I don't care if you put tape on the floor every 6 feet away. I don't care. You're getting locked down again. But not the big box stores. Oh, no. Amazon's thriving. Microsoft's thriving. But not a big box store, but Walmart's thriving. All the big players are thriving. We talked about the SBA data the other day. Small Business Administration, with respect to the PPP loans. Again, a child of the Nobody Cares Act. Further evidence that it is the Nobody Cares Act because the vast majority of loans went to bigger businesses. It's sickening, and it's all right in front of us. But people can't connect the dots. They're too busy paying attention to the circus of these elections. I mean, look, you think this is, I try to talk at a higher level and really try to hit home a little bit more on the American values and the integrity of our elections. I mean, but wake up here. I mean, seriously, we've had rigged elections in the past. John F. Kennedy won because of election interference. Okay? This is not conspiracy. His assassination might be, but his election win is not. They got assistance from the mob. And then, of course, his brother Robert Kennedy, as the Attorney General, goes after the mob. And then they both end up dead. But you connect the dots. That's a story for another time. So the protests and the riots are heating up. These lockdowns coming back in place across the world are getting people out into the streets and protesting their governments. Some of them are smart enough to go after central banks. And it's about time. It's about time because this is their livelihood. The hypocrisy is beyond ridiculous. It's always been bad, but now they're just flaunting it. Governors, mayors, city council members do this, then they're caught doing the exact opposite. It's sickening. It's sickening. And you cannot flip a switch and turn this back on. And a lot of the restrictions that are once again taking place are just going to be truly devastating. I mean, when you break this country down from an economic standpoint, right? If you just highlight some of the largest states in this country, if you really lock down only a handful of states, you are going to do just immeasurable economic damage. Lockdowns in New York, lockdowns in California, right there alone, is a huge portion of this country's economic output. I mean, California standalone would be one of the largest economies in the world. So the hits just keep on coming. So we have the SARs, those suspicious activity reports. We talked about that a little bit. I mean, you understand that I keep this podcast to a half an hour, and I like to talk more about the daily news as a way to educate and inform the audience of some basic constitutional principles, some basic economic thought and principles and theory. But we had a couple podcasts where we focused pretty much exclusively on these suspicious activity reports. And of course, this is about the fraud at banks. It's exactly what they say they are, suspicious activity reports with respect to money laundering, Ponzi schemes, all that jazz, whether they're helping launder money for drug cartels, terrorist organizations, human traffickers, etc., etc., etc. And of course, a lot of them know it. Of course, in their defense, however, I will be fair. I like to do that, obviously. A lot of them are just filed. The SAR reports are simply filed as a precaution. Rather file more to err on the side of caution than to not file an SAR and then have the government come knocking on the door and saying, why didn't you file this? This is pretty obvious, is it not? So they would have a problem. Well, I don't know who they would be having a problem because none of these banksters end up in prison. None of them end up paying fines out of their pockets. None of them end up getting fired. And if they should get fired or they are forced into quote-unquote retirement, they will receive a very nice golden parachute from the board of directors. If you did a fraction of what these guys get away with, they would lock you up and throw away the key. Yet what these banks get is a slap on the wrist. They get deferred prosecution agreements, and they pay a fine, where it literally becomes crime pays. Because they make $1 billion, and they have to pay a fine of a couple $100 million. And they get to pocket the difference. And then maybe they'll try to behave like good little boys and girls for a little while, until they find another market to rig and to manipulate. But nobody says a thing and nobody cares. Because as long as Tesla's going up 7%, who cares? We have, well, it's really all of them because they're basically all brother and sister organizations. But you have the IMF, the World Bank, in conjunction with the United Nations and the World Food Program, which I believe is an arm within the United Nations, predicting that there is going to be massive famine next year. Because of all of the locusts, the supply chain disruptions, the hoarding that's going to take place within various countries. Because whether this vaccine comes to fruition or not, are people going to trust it? From my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but every one of these vaccines requires a booster shot. So you have to take 2 of them. You'll take the initial, and then a month or so later, you're going to get a booster. Well, what happens if you have negative side effects from that first vaccine? How many people are going to line up to get that injected back into them? What are the long-term effects on this? I mean, we get the flu vaccine, if you will, the flu shot every year. That doesn't last forever. And of course, even the flu shot is 50-50 for the most part, because scientists and epidemiologists, it's best guess as to which strain is going to be most prevalent, which strain of the flu in a given year is going to be most prevalent, and they produce the vaccines accordingly. This thing has been around for several months, and supposedly we know enough about it to put these vaccines into our bodies and to trust that this is just going to be the panacea. That's it. I'm skeptical. I don't trust it. I don't trust these governments. I really don't. But be my guest if that's what you want to do. And then, sadly, but I think that this is on the brink too. And to some extent, in some other countries, we're already witnessing it. And what I'm talking about is coming civil wars, revolutions, and a world war. And I take no pleasure in saying this. I am not saying this to be hyperbolic. I'm not saying this to try to get more listeners. Not doing that at all. This is what I honestly think is going to happen. All of the tinder, all the kindling is there. It's just awaiting. It's just awaiting a spark. And to me, we already have a lot of sparks. So it really amazes me that a lot of this hasn't broken out already. But I think it's going to, because a lot of the quote-unquote stimulus is wearing off. They're going to do their damnedest to print as much money as they possibly can, spend, borrow, beg for as much money as they can to give to the people directly. Because to some extent, the powers that be might not want some of this chaos in the streets. And so they want to give you a bribe. They want to give you sit down and shut up money, which they have proven to themselves basically that that's exactly what it is. Sit down and shut up money. People will sit down and shut up. The vast majority. They'll sit down and shut up. Give me $1,200. I'll sit down and shut up. Give me an extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits, making more than what I was making working. I'll sit down and shut up. Tesla's up 7%. I'll sit down and shut up. I don't care at what expense, whose expense. I don't care that tens of millions of Americans are still out of work. I don't care that tens of millions of Americans are in food bank lines. I don't care that a significant portion of this planet may be in the zone of a massive famine next year. I don't care. Give me my bribe and let the stock market keep going up. Moral decay, anyone? Moral decline? Political decay? Social decay? Economic decay? How much more evidence do you need? USDebtClock.org. Maintaining current rates. Where will we be 4 years from now? Another presidential election. $48.5 trillion national debt. Spending $10 trillion at the federal government level alone. At that time, bringing in about close to $5 trillion. So we're going to have $4-5 trillion deficits. Like we're handing out candy. Like it's nothing. We can print money and do all of these shenanigans and be told by the powers that be that there are no negative consequences or side effects. Yet where is that money going to? If we have all of these people with all of these issues, with all of these economic concerns, people who are homeless, people who are hungry, why are we bailing out Apple and Amazon and Tesla? Can anybody answer this question for me? If there's no negative side effects, why is that where the money goes? Why wouldn't it go to the people who actually need it? Now, of course, those of you who know me know that all of these bailouts are wrong. They're all wrong. And I have explained why countless number of times, and of course I will continue to do so, but I'm going to save that again for another discussion. But talk about 2020, the year that will live in infamy. We'll see what happens next year. But we still got a few weeks to go. The election circus, and hey, pay attention to that too. The election circus. Look at all that money that the Trump campaign or whatever, the legal fund has raised, how much the RNC or the GOP have raised. Where's all that money going? Where's all of it going? Has anybody asked that question? Fraud, voter fraud, election fraud, blah, 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 blah. What do you think? I mean, do you think fraud is a one-way street? Do you think 100% of the votes cast for Donald Trump were all, quote-unquote, legal or legitimate? Yet it's only the votes for Joe Biden that are in question? I mean, come on, give me a break. Give me a break. I couldn't care less from this standpoint. Because we are a first world banana republic. This country is down to twos. We don't have a constitution anymore. Two-tier justice system on display every single day. We don't have free market capitalism. You can call this whatever other political word and economic term you want to use. But do not say that we are living in a constitutional republic because we're not. And do not tell me that we are practicing free market capitalism because we are not. You want to call this fascism? Be my guest. You want to call it socialism? Be my guest. Communism? Be my guest. Because these are command and control systems. Whether you have a certain preference for any of these words, I don't care. Because they all lead to the same place. Disaster and destruction. We're already there. They're putting the pedal to the metal. We talked about this in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, published 5 years ago. All of this is about consolidation. It's all about power. It's all about control. It's right in front of you. Small businesses going under. The Small Biz Pulse Check podcast we did last week. Still, of the remaining small businesses that exist, 50% are still at risk of closing for good. And you want to tell me that it's all about taking care of the little guy? That's what the CARES Act was for? No, that's why it's called the Nobody Cares Act. And who knows what this idiot, Joe Biden, is going to sign into law that gets passed by Congress, or what he's going to sign via fiat, via executive order. And with dingbat at the Treasury Department, God help us all, in conjunction with the idiots around the big table at the Federal Reserve, pretending they know what's best for everybody. And it doesn't matter if Trump was in there again. It doesn't matter. How much more do you need to see? You just care more about a personality. Get over it. Okay? Get over it. Your country's burning. It's a first world republic, a first world banana republic. What don't you understand? They want you distracted so they can trample on our Constitution, steal and rob us of our constitutional rights and our liberties, and to steal our money. But nah. Focus on all the crap that the news, which should just be called noise, wants you to pay attention to. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. 2020, the year that will live in infamy. If you have anything that I did not mention, send it to me. I will be glad to add it to the list and talk about it in a future podcast. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.